Oh yes, this is the Hardcore Marketing Show. My name is Casey Cheshire, and I am your host for this epic journey today. And the show actually has a sponsor. What? Cheshire Impact. Who are these guys? Now that name sounds so familiar, Casey. On a mission to help you maximize Pardot and Salesforce. That's CheshireImpact.com. Bam. Now, my guest, I'm very excited to introduce you all to him today. He is often referred to as the Bullseye Marketing Guy. He's a marketing strategist, and I would say a conversion experience expert. He's also a keynote speaker. He mentors startups at MIT. He is the author of Bullseye Marketing, which we are going to talk about. President of Revenue Associates, Louis Gudema. How are you, sir?
Good, Casey. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. I have a whole page of your accolades. I'm so glad you're here.
There's just not enough room for it, is there?
It really is. No, there's just not enough room. There's never enough room.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you're here. The theme for today, oftentimes we do a deep dive into particular topics, but, I'm interested in Bullseye Marketing and just the idea. It's a framework. And one of the things we've been talking about is planning. A lot of times people just jump right into the technology or right into the execution without an overall framework, with an overall plan of how to attack it. So I really just wanted to learn from you today. And the way we start this off here is I pass you Thor's hammer. Here you go. And what kind of strategy, what kind of bogus strategy are you hearing out there that you just want to smash? Smash some crazy myths for us here.
Well, I think, one of the key things, Casey, is that marketing changes so rapidly these days. And what worked 10 years ago certainly may not work now.
Yeah.
Even what worked 5 years ago may not work now. One of the things that happens is that marketing channels get exhausted by, they become the hot thing and everybody does it. And then after a few years, it's not nearly as effective at all. So, for example, social media really peaked. Organic social media, just posting, tweeting for brands really peaked around 2013. Because back then, if you were posting to Facebook or to LinkedIn or Twitter, 10 or 15 or even 20% of your followers might see that post. But these days, it's less than 2%.
Jeez.
Because a lot of the social media platforms about 5 years ago said, well, first of all, most people are interested in seeing the posts of their family and friends, and on LinkedIn, professional colleagues they're not very interested in these posts from brands. But also, we've now aggregated hundreds of millions of people, or in the case of Facebook, billions of people.
Yeah.
And like any other media platform, they decided they were going to charge to get your message, for a company to get its message in front of those people.
Rat bastards.
Totally understandable. It wasn't going to be a free ride forever.
Right.
So that really peaked about 5 years ago. And the same thing is true in inbound marketing or content marketing. 12 years ago when inbound was first described or put out there was way fewer web pages. There was much less content.
Sure.
You had a much better chance of getting your content ranked high and to get some significant traffic.
Yeah.
But these days, the websites with a lot of domain authority are the ones that get the high rankings. The majority of clicks are on just the first 3 links on the first page. There was a study done by Ahrefs, the SEO tool company, that found that only 1 in 20 pieces of new content even gets to page 1 in the first year, let alone to those first 3 positions.
In the first year.
And so you can, if you're a small or mid-sized company that hasn't been blogging or posting a lot of content and hasn't built up a lot of domain authority in your industry, you have a very low chance of getting your content ranked high enough to produce much traffic, unless it's a really, really highly focused piece of content that
super niche,
that no one else has put out yet.
This makes sense, because I remember back in the day, probably what year do you think it was in the heyday inbound?
Well, for content, that really has been a slower decline, I would
Sure.
say, in terms of the effectiveness for smaller mid-sized companies. Whereas with social media, you can really just see it drop off the cliff in 2013.
Totally. Yeah, I
Uh,
experienced that. I actually had a bunch of tweet ups that I was hosting, and we were just meeting up random people and we're having fun in restaurants, and social was just happening. And then all of a sudden it just sort of, yeah, it sort of just falls off. It's not cool anymore. And I also remember SEO, we would tell people, okay, look, you can start SEO, but you're not going to see your results for 3 to 6 months. But it sounds like now, based on this AREF report, it's like you may not see results for a year, if that.
yeah, or even longer.
Yeah,
And again, it depends on what industry you're in.
true.
If 5 years ago you were blogging about artificial intelligence or blockchain, you could have gotten high rankings and a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
But if you start blogging about AI and blockchain today, you're buried. You don't have a chance, right? And so unless again you do some very, very niche thing, if you said maybe blockchain for this particular industry, which no
Right.
one else has written about, then you might be able to get high ranking for that. One of the funny things on my website, the Revenue and Associates website, uh, the number one most visited page, and this has been for years, is a blog post I wrote, oh God, 2, 3, maybe 4 years ago, about the Disney company value proposition.
Really?
Yeah. And
Huh.
it's because no one else has written about the Disney value proposition. And if you search for, Walt Disney Company value proposition, I'm the top link because it's unique. It doesn't drive any
You
business.
are. You're actually number one.
Yeah, it doesn't drive any business for me, but it's a unique piece of content that I just happened to have written when I noticed that they didn't have a very good value proposition. And if they made it more customer centric, it could be much better.
Right.
So that's a great example of niche content, but let me give you an example that actually drives traffic for someone. This company, I'm not working with them, but someone else I know, where they have a service that is in many cities. It's used in many cities, and what they did was they produced a piece of content about the local regulations in each of these cities. And so if you search for the local regulations in Dallas or in Seattle, it's either the city's website or this company's piece of content. That's what you're going to find. And so that content by itself doesn't drive traffic, but it brings the right people to the company, to their website. Then they see the offering, and then they get leads from that. So that kind of really hyper-focused piece of content can. But for that traditional inbound approach where you're supposed to flood the zone with hundreds of pieces of content,
Right.
that's just not going to work these days for most companies.
Interesting. So socials out. Inbound though, HubSpot championed that for a long time. And
And they still do.
I guess, yeah, right. They still do. I,
Yeah.
I keep waiting for them to separate themselves out from that a little bit, because there was actually a blog post a while back where it was someone at Pardot, we're buddies with them, and Mike Volpe, who was at HubSpot at the time. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they were saying crazy things like, "Oh, you don't need marketing automation. You just need inbound." I'm like, come on, guys. You should be doing a little bit of everything here. But yeah, like
Yeah.
the crazy talk around the Kool-Aid of inbound. I mean, all things in moderation, including moderation, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. They HubSpot does redefine inbound. So now, for years, advertising was the boogeyman of inbound marketing. That was the enemy. That
true.
was interrupting. Uh,
Right.
and now HubSpot has advertising tools, and they even say, oh, we don't know where people got the impression that advertising isn't part of inbound.
You guys.
Yeah, exactly. I think I know where they heard that. So,
Man.
so they do kind of try to redefine it to the point where now if you follow what they say now, it doesn't really have much of a definition. But if you think of what the classic definition of inbound was, that is certainly not effective for most companies.
Right. And that's actually how we got connected. Was you had written an article about inbound, about HubSpot, and the
Yeah.
direction they're going with it, needing to eventually drop that and move on.
Well, yeah, and I guess in your program notes you could put a link to the piece
I will. I'll do that. Yeah.
on the OpenView site, which is a blog post. The title was "Inbound has passed its expiration date."
Right. Which caught my
And
attention.
yeah, well, it caught the attention of a lot of people, and I got a lot of positive feedback from that. The chief growth officer of Marketo reposted it, and
Was that Jill? Oh no,
yeah,
growth officer. Oh, okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
Joe Rowley,
Yeah.
and other people. Some other prominent tech and marketing executives, reached out to me to say they agreed and thought it was a good piece. So, I think it's a valuable piece for people to read.
I've always, that whole moderation thing we were talking about earlier, have good content. It's going to fuel a lot of your marketing, but to wait and hope that Father Google will bring you your business. It's like the most fickle thing. Panda, penguin, who knows, something changes in the algorithm. And maybe even if you did spend a year getting to number one, you may not be there next after that. So it's like, it could be a good source. Many people it is, organically at least, but you gotta be looking at all the different channels. So I'm glad to see you dispel some of the legacy myth around that.
Yeah, well, I think that, content certainly is very valuable for telling your story. It's your chance to tell your story in your
Right.
words, to highlight your customers and what you've done for others and how you work, what kind of culture you have, what your employees are like, and so forth. So, you don't want to have like a minimalist website, uh, but just don't expect a ton of inbound traffic from it.
Right. Still create the content, but really what we're getting at is it's not just going to be discovered magically anymore.
Yeah.
Like you could have the best white paper that no one reads. So you actually have to do some things to get out there, get that in front of the right people.
Yeah, and that's usually paid these days.
Right. Right.
Um, or some other things that I talk about in my book, and that's really where the Bullseye Framework came out of, was realizing in the work that I was doing with companies um, that some of these approaches weren't working anymore.
Right.
And I'm certainly not the only one who realized that, but then developed this Bullseye Framework, this Bullseye marketing approach, as the techniques that are the fastest and frankly the least expensive, the lowest risk. That's what's in the center of the bullseye.
Right.
Ways for companies to actually grow their market and their leads and sales quickly, rather than those other approaches like inbound or social that are very slow and may never work at all.
Cool. I'm ready to get into it. So we've crushed the myth around social being your thing to go to right now. We've crushed the idea of inbound being your one thing that's going to save your company right now. So we've got all these things. Marketing's changed. I love that. First thing I heard from you was you got to keep evolving your marketing. And
Yeah, absolutely.
I get comfortable in a source that I like, or in a channel, or in a methodology, but the market's evolving. And, if I'm still tweeting and expecting that to drive the majority of my business, something's going on here. So we've smashed that. That's out. So take us into the Bullseye Kingdom. What is the real right approach to this?
Yeah, and maybe 5 years from now, I'll be saying, boy, that bullseye approach is really dated. But, in 2018, I'm putting my stake in the ground with Bullseye
Boom.
Marketing.
Yeah.
So what I describe in the book, first of all, phase one is taking full advantage of your existing marketing assets.
Okay.
So and this is a little bit of a tweak on this if you're a startup, but I'm going to assume that you're a company that's been around for a few years, and most companies have marketing assets that they just aren't aware of and they're not taking advantage of. And so certainly in the very center of the bullseye is the customer, and understanding your customer and actually talking to them and listening, which many companies don't do, creating a superior customer experience, selling more to existing customers and focusing more on that than always trying to land new brands, new logos, because it's 5 to 25 more times more expensive to close a new account than it is to grow
Right.
an existing one.
Okay.
And to have customer referral programs, and to get those references, both in terms of reference quotes, which are gold, but actually asking customers, who should I be talking to? Who do you know that could use my service that you could introduce me to? Those
Got it.
kinds of things many companies aren't doing. Another one is email lists. All the time I have conversations with companies, small and mid-sized companies who have thousands or tens of thousands of email contacts. And when I say, how many times a year do you email them? And they'll say, well, around the holidays. McKinsey says email marketing is 40 times more effective than social media for
Jeez.
customer acquisition. And in my experience, that's been true. And it costs almost nothing. You can have a 10,000 person email list. You can email as many times as you want to on platforms like MailChimp or Constant Contact for less than $100 a month.
True.
It's peanuts.
Now, you didn't acquire them by email, though, right? I mean, you can meet someone via social, whereas email, unless they're getting forwarded around, you found them some other way. Are we saying list buying is 40x more
No,
effective,
no,
or
not list buying. You got to build an organic list. You got to build a
building your
house
list?
list.
Okay.
And it's customers, it's people who have come to your
Got
website,
it.
downloaded things. This gets into this whole discussion about gating or not gating content and so forth.
Yeah. You want to
That's
go down that rabbit hole?
no, that's marketing. That's graduate level.
Okay. Got
We're
it.
just going to stick right now to the basics.
Basics. Let's do it.
Another one is the website. So you got traffic come to your website. Most companies have poor messaging on their website. They don't
True.
have a compelling differentiating message that's really clear and easy to understand. And 3/4 of companies, 3 out of 4 companies, and I've surveyed this of B2B companies for 50 to 1,000 employees, 3 out of 4 had no apparent calls to action or conversion devices on their website.
Jeez, 3 out of 4?
Yeah, 3 out of 4.
People.
And so, literally 99.9% of the people who are coming to their website come and go, and they have no idea who they are or what they want or if they could do business with them. And,
Yeah.
is increasing the calls to action so that you could get in front of those people and start to have a conversation with them. That can be a huge difference. Another thing is the collaboration between your marketing and sales teams, and doing things like account-based marketing and targeted selling programs that especially for B2B companies, can be some of the fastest ways to get new business. So these are all things that typically cost very little
Yeah.
to implement. They really are a change of focus more than anything else, and they can produce results in a matter of weeks or a few months instead of years that it can take something like social media or inbound to take.
Yeah, that's a great point. Especially the idea that the fact that people are already on your website.
Yeah.
Unless you've not created one, there probably are people there already. Just the majority of them either, they're seeing 1,000 different things they could click on. So, and no calls to action. So, okay, I'm going to leave. No strong call to action here. Get this thing. I'm here to help you. Here's what we do specifically. And I actually remember that story of that one company you helped out where they did labeling, and
Yeah.
the first time, the first version of that website was just this, it was cutesy and it was unclear what they did.
Yeah, they produce custom food labels for major brands, companies like Whole Foods and Wegmans and Dunkin'
Jeez.
Donuts. And yet you came to their website, you didn't even know that's what they did.
Yeah, it kind of looked like a pet food company to start with.
They
First
had
picture you
these,
showed.
yeah, they had some pictures of Dalmatians on their homepage. So we got pictures of their actual, food labels on the containers, on the
Right.
products, and they have great looking labels, really sexy, attractive professional things. So, a big difference there. But, a simple mistake that many companies make, aside from the 3 out of 4 that don't have any calls to action,
Jeez.
a lot of companies use these carousels on their homepage, and they have 3 or 4 messages that cycle through,
Yep.
and they think, oh, we can jam 3 or 4 messages down the visitor's throat, but in fact they end up jamming nothing
Mm-hmm.
because it all gets diluted and goes by too fast. And if they had one compelling message instead, one compelling differentiator, that would be much more effective than trying to have 3 or 4. So these are all things that cost almost nothing,
Right.
and can really have an impact. Then in the second phase of the Bullseye approach, as you start to look for new customers, uh, you get in front of customers who want to buy now. So this is using what we call intent data, which is
Right.
fairly new. I mean, it wasn't called that 10 years ago much, or there wasn't as much available. But, our markets are much smaller than we think they are, because
Interesting.
we may have, a certain type of customer that we're selling to, but unless we're selling something like food or coffee that people, use every day, uh, good example.
Yeah.
Uh, there are some products and services that people and companies only acquire every few months or every several years.
True.
And so if they're not in market, it's not very effective or efficient to be marketing to them.
Yeah. True.
Or, let's say you're a service provider. If someone's happy with the service provider they're already using, it doesn't matter.
Right.
They're just not looking for someone else.
Right.
So how can you identify those potential customers who are in market now? And certainly search advertising is one of those ways, because if you can't get
Mm-hmm.
your content high on page 1, uh, you can get your ads high on page 1, and you can
Right.
ramp up that program really quickly.
Right.
Uh, and and if you really focus on the keywords that show intent rather than broad interest in the topic, uh, you can help focus in on customers that want to buy soon. Um, there's tools for your website, again, where you can identify who are the people or who are the accounts that suddenly, unlike last month, are coming back and looking at our site a lot.
Right.
And that can be a real tip-off that something is happening. They're now seriously considering you in a way they weren't a month ago, and you need to reach out and be in touch with them.
Intent is such a powerful thing. In my head, I've only really given Google searches, king of intent. Are there other places you can go to try to find people
Yeah.
that are in that buy now, or they're at least shopping, they're in the market?
Yeah, well, the one is, as I was saying, how they interact with you and your content. So
Okay.
if
Yep.
they're looking at your website, if they're opening your emails, if they're downloading your infographics, if they're attending your webinars, all those
Right.
kinds of things ramp up. That can be a real signal.
Got
And
it.
then there's third-party intent data. So you've got companies like TechTarget and Aberdeen and Bombora and the Big Willow, who aggregate intent data across, in some cases, hundreds of websites. Again, looking for, in that B2B space,
Mm-hmm.
is a company, are the people from one particular company suddenly searching for a particular piece of equipment or type of service, and they call it a surge. Is there a surge of interest in that
Right.
that
Okay.
wasn't there a month
Yeah.
ago? And then you have companies on the consumer side like Kroger and Walmart and Amazon, and they have intent data. Google and Facebook, when you look at how you can target your ads, they have intent data.
Mm.
And so there's all these sources where you can be using intent data to focus your ads more effectively. And that's what I talk about in the book. That's the second phase of Bullseye marketing. And then the
Go ahead.
third phase
Well,
of
hold on. Let me just review real quick
okay.
with my bullseye brain here. Phase one, taking full advantage of the content, of the marketing assets you have. We talked about content. We talked about the website, conversions. We may come back to conversions because that's fun.
Yeah,
In
all
fact,
those marketing assets
yeah,
that you already have.
all those things, not just the content, but like the assets you have. So actually fully utilizing those, making them more efficient, optimizing them. And once you've done that, you got us into phase two, going for the people with intent, the people that are in the buy now phase, people that are
Exactly.
more ready than less ready. Got it.
Right.
So then now we're
Exactly.
into phase three.
And phase three is where you cast that wider net.
Okay.
This is where you do these long-term brand building and awareness programs like content, webinars, social media, display advertising, that can help build awareness about your brand. And so that a year or two from now, when someone is looking to buy what you sell,
Yep.
they've been following you for a while, and they've been, I have done, not just when I had my own agency before, business development, and now for my agency, but then in between those two agencies, was VP of business development for two other marketing agencies.
Cool.
And one time we were contacted by a VP of marketing um, at a prospective company, good sized company, like $700 million revenue company. And I said to her,
Nice.
um, how'd you hear about us? And she said, well, you were everywhere, so I figured I had to talk to you. So that's phase three. So in the
Yeah.
long run, you want that omni-channel program.
Right.
But if you start with that, if you don't already have phases 1 and 2 built out,
Mm.
and you start with just social media, or you start with just content, very likely after 6 or 8 months, you're going to say, well, this isn't doing anything. Why are we wasting our time on this? We knew marketing wouldn't work for us. But if you do it in the 3-phase approach that I describe, you can get results quickly and inexpensively. You can build confidence and grow that full omni-channel approach, and have a really effective marketing program.
This makes sense. And I think it's important that you've written this book because a lot of the tendency is to go to phase three first, or
Totally.
go to the bells and whistles. I don't know if marketers were all cats and dogs here, but it feels like it sometimes. We're like, so marketing ROI, this planning, we're gonna squirrel. Let's go do X. Oh, there's this new technology that Facebook has. It lets us go do these weird things, and you do those weird things, and then you send them to the homepage, right? You
Yeah.
spend like $10 on that click. They get to your homepage. They're like, why am I even here? And then they leave. It's
Right.
crazy. And so what I like about this is, and I picked up on this word earlier, it's a change of focus. All we're trying to do is focus your next step. And then when I was thinking about, when you were talking about first phase, was, look, if you've got limited amount of time or budget or both, like we all do in marketing, then if you're going to focus on one thing, focus here first, because that's
Right.
going to have the most bang for your buck. And then once you've exhausted all that, now you're cranking. And to your point, you're going to have some confidence, because when you start making those particular changes first, things are going to start working. You're going to start getting in that groove. You're going to start getting more leads, more qualified leads. All the goodness is going to start happening. Now you can pile on by going to phase two and selling to people so that eventually by the time you get to phase three, you have the confidence that comes from crushing things. And what I would add to that is, when you've got the confidence, that usually means the leadership team has confidence in you. And lo and behold, those budget strings that were tight as a boa constrictor are now just like, oh, do you want some more money? Would you like more money next quarter? It's like, I think I'm good, but great. Yeah, sure. I'll take, it's like, sure, more marketing spend, but that spend comes from reporting the ROI, from having those successes and the confidence, that you get from this focus. It's really cool.
Well, I haven't met a marketer yet who had too much money thrown
I
at him,
know, right?
but it certainly is a way to protect your budget, and to say, if anyone wants to say we need to cut someplace, you can say, well, look at the results we're getting. But it's really critical to do those phase 1 programs first, because if you do phase 2 or 3 without taking care of phase 1, you haven't laid the foundation for their success. You need to have that, good understanding of your customer, the website messaging, the calls to action, the conversion experiences, and so forth, before you go into things like paid search ads, or intent data, or these content or social media programs. Because if you don't have that set up, you're really just kind of trying to fill a bucket that's full of holes.
Totally. A holy bucket. And that water is leaking out. I was just actually watching a rerun of a Survivor thing where these teams were carrying this big wheel with water in the middle over these obstacles and everything, and you had to fill up a bucket on the other end. But as they're carrying it, they're just water's leaking out all over the place. It just reminded me of your bucket analogy, because it's like you got the water in the first place, but now you're just losing it all over the place because you don't have your foundation set up. So you're all bumped. It's crazy. Why are we not doing this in marketing? Do we just not know any better? Have you just not seen your book? But even if I gave someone your book, we need to actually get them to follow the path. So what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple reasons. First of all, most companies, this survey I did of 351 B2B companies with 50 to 1,000 employees, I looked at these 351 companies, and these are not solopreneurs or 5-person companies. These are companies with 50 to 1,000 employees. They're actually the heart of the U.S. economy. According to the Census Bureau, companies that size employ more than 3 times as many people as companies, enterprises with over 1,000 employees. So these truly are hugely important to the economy. And yet I found and this was a shock to me, that software companies were very aggressive users of modern marketing programs, but companies in all other industries, such as manufacturing, medical devices, professional services, were hardly marketing at all. Very few of them were. And so first of all, it's not in the DNA of non-software companies to be marketing. But secondly, the big challenge for companies these days is, 25, 30 years ago, there used to be only 6 or 8 ways to reach a customer. Print, direct mail, TV, radio, billboards. Now there are dozens of channels. You've got social media and email and websites and virtual reality and augmented reality and on and on.
Right.
And there are literally thousands and thousands, over, I think, 7,000 vendors now selling software related to marketing. And they're all out there pushing, our approach is the approach you have to do.
Right.
You need to have this kind of program. And frankly, just social media has gotten a tremendous amount of buzz because we do spend a majority of our time online on social media.
True.
And so in the book, I describe ways, again, hyper-focused ways, not just organic posts or tweets, but hyper-focused ways that you can take advantage of social media. For example, social media advertising, which you can, they have a ton of data of their users. And you can really focus based on demographics and psychographics and interests and even, as I was saying, intent. You can upload your email list to LinkedIn or Facebook. And so now you get your same message that you were emailing to people, they see on their social channels, things like that. But so the reason is, that so there are ways to do these things, but there's so much chatter that for companies that haven't been doing it, and even marketers who are kind of experienced in it, it can be overwhelming.
It's noisy, right? It's noisy, and then
it's very noisy.
To your point, when you have software folks, and there's this blurry line because you want to do thought leadership, but when Man, what I hate is when the thought leadership from some company pitching something just gets so grossly overstated. Like all these other sources are dead. The only one that's around is mine. Come to
Yeah.
me. And then they're using VC backed funds to just push that strategy on everyone. It's like, guys, oh, that's so gross. It's not even the case.
Yeah, well,
But
when they have
it's
tens of
loud.
millions of dollars to push it out,
Yeah.
you don't want to take your marketing strategy from a marketing software company,
Yes.
because they're just going to be pushing their solution.
Oh, totally. Totally.
Uh, so that's I think that's a major reason why these challenges are out there these days.
It makes sense. Man, you surveyed 351 companies. What else did you get from that? I mean, what kind of learnings? Because I can't imagine. It's the heart, to your point, the heart of the economy, the heart of more people are employed. I'm sure there's like a treasure trove of things. Were you sitting in your lair just flipping through
Yeah,
the data and
not far removed. So it wasn't even a survey; it was more of a study, because what I was looking
okay.
for, I had these 9 digital marketing programs that I was looking for that I could see from the outside if they were doing them at all. Were they aware at all of this?
Oh,
Not how
yeah.
well were they doing it, but for example, did they have a marketing automation program? I could
Right.
tell from
You can tell.
website tag.
Right. Yep.
Did they even have web analytics like Google Analytics on their website? Did they have, this was more important 4 years ago, the first time I did this study,
Yep.
and then I redid it this year with the same 351 companies, but did they have a responsive mobile friendly website?
Yep. You can tell
Were
that too.
they
Wow. See,
creating content?
yeah.
Were they active on social media? Were they doing search advertising? All these things that I could tell. And so using this
Wow.
9-point scorecard, the software companies were typically using 5, 6, 7, many of them even 8 or 9 of these programs, and the median was that they were using 7 out of 9. The
Wow.
non-software companies were using typically just 1, 2, or 3 of the programs, and the median was 2.
2 out of
And,
9.
yeah, which means
Man.
nothing, because
Yeah.
they got 1 point just for having Google Analytics on their website.
Right. Oh,
And this,
right. Which is easy to do, even if you don't look at it.
even if you
Yeah.
don't look at it, right?
Yeah.
And so this year I revisited those companies, and those non-software companies had increased the median from 2 to 3, which still is like nothing.
Well done, guys.
Mostly that was because most companies redo their website every 4 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
These days, if you're going to redo your website, any good web developer is going to make it responsive.
Yep.
And so there was a huge increase from 20% to 80% of these companies having responsive websites.
Okay. Fair enough. So they got a couple bonus points there.
Right. But it wasn't part of an integrated marketing program.
Right.
The
And
only other program that increased significantly was posting to social media.
right.
And you know what I think of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I do.
But some things may have even declined. Like it looked like there was even a slight decline in things like content development
Sure.
or conversion optimization.
How about the marketing automation? What do you recall any takeaways from that? Because obviously I swim in that all day.
Yeah. So the marketing automation, the margin of error was about 5% in my
Cool.
survey.
Now, is that better than the election or worse? I think.
I think that's just slightly worse. But the
Can I believe what
interesting,
you're saying?
I think you can,
Okay.
because the interesting thing is that marketing automation appeared to grow a bit,
Mm-hmm.
roughly from I think it was about 20 to 24% of companies, which is still only 1 out of 4 of these bigger SMBs.
Right. I
There
was going
was
to say for a second, I was going to say, well, HubSpot has like 8,000 little mom, but that's not who you're looking at. You're looking at those larger companies, 50, I think you said to 1,000 employees.
exactly
Okay.
right.
It's probably like 2
Um,
HubSpot accounts.
Yeah, well, I mean, HubSpot says that it's, focused on 20 to 2,000 employees. So,
Okay.
they're in there too, but they certainly have many clients who are under 20.
Yeah.
And there's others that are for small companies like Infusionsoft or Acton are,
Right.
very focused on smaller.
And so
There
that would
was,
count. That would count. But you're looking at
yeah,
the bigger companies. And so the bigger companies, though, man, 52. I would expect them all to have marketing automation by now. But I wonder, I don't know if you recall. I mean, this is on off the cuff, but I'm sure the software companies all, they had much more adoption of that than say the
yeah,
manufacturing companies and
yeah, it
whatnot.
was much higher.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact figure, but I think it was like 70% or so
Okay. Yeah.
for the software companies.
Sure.
Uh, and there was actually an interesting split between which marketing automation program they were using.
Really?
Yeah, because the software companies heavily preferred Marketo,
Yeah.
and the non-software companies heavily preferred HubSpot.
Interesting.
And in both cases, among the companies that actually were using marketing automation, about 60% of those software companies were using Marketo, and about 60% of the non-software companies were using HubSpot.
Interesting. You know, we do these so I love where this ties in because when we look at people with marketing automation, we go then and we have similar it's a 10-point checklist, and we actually have to sort of get down and dirty with people and mind meld with them to find out the answers to these things, called the CSI. But we found with our 10-step points of, are they actually using marketing automation, the average we're
Yeah.
seeing is about 3 out of 10 in terms of use. A lot of
You mean
people.
that they have it, but they're not actually using it?
Yeah, yeah,
Well, I do know, I couldn't tell in general
yeah.
how well they were using it. But I could tell that the majority, well over half of the HubSpot companies, did not have active marketing content programs.
Yeah.
And so even though, HubSpot was really pushing the idea of inbound marketing and they were a HubSpot customer, they were not very aggressive in their own content.
Yeah, we see that a lot. We help people migrate off of HubSpot and
Mhm.
Marketo and Eloqua onto Pardot,
Yeah,
and typically the less you've done, the easier it is to migrate, right? So
right.
HubSpot migrations are pretty easy normally. Maybe like
Yeah.
I can count on a hand how many people where they've actually built out. That's why I was surprised to hear HubSpot was so well represented for those larger companies. Normally people grow off of it after a bit. So it's
Yeah,
interesting.
well, we're talking about 60% of 24%.
Oh, good
So,
point. Yeah. I
it's
can't do that math, but I understand where it's going.
yeah, so you're down below 15% of all those companies because most of them don't have any marketing automation program at all.
Yeah.
And
Crazy.
it's almost, if you ever read Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm,
Yep.
uh, it's almost as if marketing technology as a whole has not deeply penetrated the mainstream market. It's certainly been adopted into that early adopter, innovator side of the
Agreed.
technology adoption curve. Uh, and it's certainly in, your large um, consumer brands, your P&Gs, you your large B2B companies, certainly on the software side. Uh, but I, but I've worked with companies. For example, I was doing some consulting last year to a several billion-dollar manufacturer, um, and one of their goals was to get Salesforce implemented as a CRM because they had no CRM. This is a multi-billion-dollar company,
Yeah.
and
Would they
I
have
mean,
Excel spreadsheets for that? It's the worst.
and I they had no marketing automation
Hmm.
in most cases, and even one of their divisions, which was a several $100 million division, didn't even have a responsive website.
Right. Interesting.
Go figure.
You know what? I've experienced too, because we basically became I'm just a longtime user of marketing automation, and I was right there when Pardot got acquired by Salesforce, and so um, I'd almost even call it the heyday. But what this heyday really is, if I'm thinking about crossing the chasm, and if people haven't read this book, go check it out. It'll help you understand a lot of just how things come about, new things come in, and when they really get popular. I guess what I was really experiencing was to your point, the innovators, the early adopters. I don't know if it's even crossed the chasm yet. It's or chasm. Is it chasm? Is it
I
chasm?
say chasm, but I've heard
It might
there's
be a tomato thing, right?
yeah, I've heard that there's 17 pronunciations for the word pecan. So I think we can go with whatever we want to here.
What do you go with on that nut? You go
I
with
pecan.
I think I say pecan. Pecan?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm confused,
right.
man. I don't
There's
know. I'll
there's a
just say
lot of
what
them.
so I was saying earlier though, I think what I've experienced was that early adopters happened very quickly for marketing automation, or at least in terms of when Pardot came on the scene. I mean, Eloqua will say it didn't take a while, but they weren't easy to use. But when you things like Pardot, HubSpot, I think it's very, very quick that those early adopters came in there. But it feels like to me, because I'm in this stuff all the time, that just everyone has it. Well, naturally, all of our customers do, right?
Right.
But everyone doesn't, and that number is accurate. I think Serious Decisions had one too, around 20% but I'm sure that's increased since then. So right around a quarter of the companies having marketing automation, and it's been like 10 years now.
Oh, more than that.
More, I
I
guess more
mean,
than that. Yeah.
I think Eloqua, that's at least 15 years old.
Yeah, but I don't know if that counts because it's well, I guess it does because
Oh,
it's
for
just
sure.
hard to use. But you're right. It's been
Yeah,
all
it's
of
more
it's
of an
been around.
enterprise tool. But
Yeah.
uh, no, I think that to me, this was a shock.
Yeah.
And believe me, 4 years ago, the first time I did this study, I went around depressed for weeks. I was
Sure.
like, I just assumed that people knew about these, advanced digital marketing tools. And the other thing that's important to understand is then I looked at the software companies. I said, okay, does this digital marketing scorecard really matter? Am I measuring anything meaningful? And I correlated the score on this 0 to 9 scorecard with their growth rate.
Mm.
And it was like a perfect line.
How'd you
And
measure growth rate? I mean, you can't really ask them. Were they
yeah, well, the
public?
ones that were publicly disclosing their
Got it.
finances.
Okay.
So either they were public companies or they had announced, results, or they had been acquired, or somehow their revenue numbers had come out.
Huh.
And so the companies that scored 8 or 9
Yeah.
were growing roughly 5 times faster than the companies scoring 0 to 3.
Jeez.
And like I said, it was a perfect curve: 0 to 3, 4 to 5, 6 to 7, 8 to 9. Because if you're not doing digital marketing today, you're not marketing.
Yeah. Really.
If this manufacturing company I worked with, their idea of marketing was trade shows and brochures.
Yep.
And yet there was a huge amount of digital conversation around their industry, and tens of thousands of searches a month, and social interactions, and all sorts of things
Wow.
happening around their industry. And sometimes older executives don't get that.
Right.
I'm a young guy, you're a young guy, Casey, but
Yeah.
sometimes those people in their 50s or 60s, they may not be as active
Sure.
on social media or on the internet. But millennials, who are increasingly not just influencers but decision makers,
Mm-hmm.
that's the way that's where they live. And they're certainly online for both personal and professional reasons. And so you have to be out there. Companies have to be out there in that digital virtual space as well as the traditional.
Right. It really seems like that sort of phased, different from your phases, more of the evolution where we started out traditional marketing, Mad Men, billboards, radio, guesstimating where the impact was happening, and then digital kept bringing things onto the computer, and we got more tracking and better numbers and more directional ROI. Unless you're e-commerce, you had some really good ROI calculations. And then from there, once you're at that stage, that's where that marketing automation and some of these more advanced tools made a difference. But yeah, I actually maybe 2 months ago talked to someone who was still in that early phase. It was really weird. It was like one of those old Mel Gibson movies or something where someone was frozen in time. You're talking to them and they're like, yeah, we do mostly billboards and radio advertising. You're like, whoa, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But that was status quo. To your point, it's always evolving. So not only can we not use the marketing we used 5 years ago, we definitely don't want to be relying on what we did 20 years ago.
It all depends on where your customer is. I mean, if your customer,
that's a good point.
If your customer is at trade shows and you can make that effective, that definitely needs to be part of the mix. But
sure,
I worked with a company a few years ago, and we were implementing search advertising for them.
Okay.
And they cut back their trade shows from 29 to 4.
Wow.
Because and plowed that money into search ads because they found that was much more effective for lead generation than trade shows were.
Right.
That usually is going to produce some fights with sales because sales likes to be at trade shows, even if they don't like to stand at a booth.
Right.
But there's a lot of there's a lot of good meetings you can have at a trade show. And
sure.
When I had my agency, there were 4 or 5 trade shows a year that were important to us, but there were other things that partially it was just showing the flag, that brand awareness, partially a chance to reconnect with current customers and get new leads. It served a lot of purposes. But it's all about knowing where your customer is and getting in front of them where they are.
Agreed. And, and tracking the ROI of those too. That hopefully that was part of the decision where they pared those back. We had a group that was doing 80 a year and they had no idea which ones were effective or not. So they were like held hostage to keep, they had to keep doing it because something was working. They were selling, right? They were getting new customers. They just didn't know where they came from. So and come to find out it was like super cliche. Like this should be in a Harvard business school case study, but it was like a Pareto rule. It was like a 80-20. About 30 of the shows were driving new business and effective. 50 of them were a complete waste of time and money. And you get rid of that right away and start putting that into search and some other areas where you can actually, test out some other channels.
Yeah, it's surprising, how long just from inertia marketing programs can continue.
And like sometimes that's when people get into a company that they really like and they see how it actually works, like, wow, how does this even function? Sometimes I think companies are just winging it and still staying in business. So, if that's what your competition is doing and you're following a more focused approach, following these phases, right? If they took those 50 trade shows, the time and the spend, they put that back into your phase 1 of Bullseye, clean up that website. You're not selling puppy chow here. You're selling this amazing, product, and, clean that up, conversion rates, all those things in phase 1. Maybe it spills into phase 2 now. Way
absolutely.
more effective, right? Way more effective than one more trade show that you're not doing anything at.
Yeah, absolutely.
So cool. So cool. And, that's like been my driving mission, is just to increase that number on that marketing automation. Cause it drives me crazy when people invest in a tool, it's like those billions of people that have the Marketo and they use it like MailChimp. Like, come on guys, that thing's free. And if you're going to use that, great. But if you're going to invest in this tool that can do all these things, and one of the things it can do, like you're talking about with market automation, you can hear intent. You can listen for that, automatically throw some engagements and throw flags in the air if you have someone who has intent, so sales can reach out. If you're going to use that, actually use it.
Oh yeah. Well, I had a conversation one time with a VP of marketing, and I could tell that they had a marketing automation on their website.
Okay.
They had a marketing automation program in place. and I asked them how well it was working for them. And he said, oh, not very much. We get analytics, but not much else from it. And I said, um,
Yeah.
well, do you know that, for example, it could alert you if a prospect comes back that, you've given a proposal to someone, your salespeople haven't been able to get in touch with them for 6 weeks. Suddenly they're returning to your website. Your salespeople could get an alert about that. That could be
Yeah.
really valuable to you.
Yeah.
And he said, well, yeah, but that would mean we'd have to integrate it with our CRM, and that's going to be too much of a hassle.
Oh my goodness.
So, it's one thing to have it. It's another thing to use it well.
Yeah.
And, I think most people who start companies, and I certainly was in that role when I started my agency, my first agency 20 years ago, you have an expertise in a field. You're really good at that product or service. You have ideas around how you can do it better than some other companies.
Yep.
But in many cases, you haven't had a lot of, if any, education or training on business in general.
Right.
Suddenly you find yourself running a business, and there can be a lot of areas, finance and HR and other things too besides marketing, that you're really kind of doing by the seat of your pants.
Totally.
And so marketing's one of them, and it's an important one, and you and I know that it can drive growth, but to people who haven't had much experience with it, who are overwhelmed by all these messages, they may just think of it as an expense and not a useful investment.
Yeah. You said earlier, inertia. You have that inertia of a company doing its thing. Hey, this doesn't work very well, but it works. Cold calling and blasting people, or the trade shows. There might be that 5x growth if you adopt, a couple more of these things. But you are where you are. So it sounds like either those people choose to want to get to that 5x, they want to get that much more growth, or eventually they retire and somebody else comes in who, maybe had schooling on it. But if you're waiting to learn about marketing automation at school, you are incorrect, sir. No, not you, but like anyone listening out there. If by the time school is teaching a strategy, you're probably not even using it anymore. So just saying.
Well, hopefully, I hope that some schools will start using my book.
That would be fun. I'd be okay with that. That'd be great.
I think there's a great opportunity there for college students who are studying marketing. I've even had the reaction. One of the Amazon.com reviews said this would be a good book for MBAs.
Yeah.
Because they're going to come out of there with a lot of theoretical knowledge, but on the first day of work, their boss is going to say, you need to, work on some programs that generate business for us.
Right.
And this is the book that can show them a lot of the ways to do that.
Right. I agree. Let's get into all their little mitts. Let's get it into their hands.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I will definitely post a link to it. Is it on Audible? Have you done any of that yet?
I haven't, because there's over 100 full color images in the book.
Good call.
And I just think that without being able to see those examples of good marketing, it just loses too much.
I'm an Audible guy, but you know what? When I saw your presentation around, that company we talked about earlier, the manufacturing the labels, that spoke 1,000 words, because their first website, you and I could talk about it for 10 minutes, but to just see it, you go, oh yeah, okay. And then when you saw the new one, you went, oh yeah. Like it looked professional. It looked like they could handle business from Dunkin' Donuts and, whoever else wants to use, large company wants to use them. That picture was worth 1,000 words. So I could see the importance of, get a copy of that book, have it, you can read, underline and highlight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The pictures make a difference.
For sure. Well, the question that all this creates in me now is like, who are you? How did you become the Bullseye Marketing Guy? How did you, you've had all these experiences. Maybe just take us back it's a little Louis days, or what kind of transformations did you have along the way where you ended up being this, this thought leader?
Uh, well, I hope I'm a thought leader, but uh,
You are. I say you
like most digital marketing guys, I grew up in a small farm town in northern Illinois
are.
and was in 4-H and showing purebred Suffolk sheep at the county fair.
So you showed sheep. Now, what do you have to do? Is it like showing a dog? Do you have to like groom it and wash it and then?
Oh yeah,
Really?
and yeah, you want them to look their best,
Okay.
and you want to
Okay.
look your best.
And hopefully they don't
And
try to like roll over in the grass after you just wash them down and
no,
whatnot.
no. So my father was in the cattle business, and
Wow.
I grew up in a little town. When I was 12, we moved to a medium-sized city, Rockford, Illinois, about 150,000 people.
What was that like? You went from like farm kid to suburbia.
Yeah, it was okay.
It
I
was
mean,
okay.
there's
Yeah.
there's some shock there, but
Yeah.
as we were growing up, the expectation always was you're not going to live in this town forever. You're going to go to college and go someplace else. And,
Nice.
we had visited, places like Chicago and New York and, other places. So it
Got
wasn't
it.
a total shock. And then I went to University of Michigan. And after that, moved out to Boston. And my initial work, a lot of it was in theater, writing and directing.
No kidding.
Which is not a bad background for marketing,
So have you written
creative.
plays or?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I'm
Uh,
big into theater too, and I wrote a play as well. So what kind of plays did you write?
um, Largely unproduced ones.
As have we all. See, now I gotta really.
But I directed also. So, at that point, marketing was much more focused on creative and much less about data. Now you need
Right.
that balance
You
of,
do need the
of
data, yeah.
data and technology. You still need the creative. The new marketing technologies have not made anything obsolete, but they've added many more skills that a marketing team needs, even if every individual marketer isn't going to have every skill.
Right.
Um,
So you really like a writer, like so the theater and the writing, all that
and storytelling,
and
is
storytelling. Yeah,
so central to marketing.
totally.
Uh, and so my first corporate client was Coleco Toys at the height of Cabbage Patch Kids.
What was the height of Cabbage Patch Kids?
Well, at the height of Cabbage Patch Kids, they sold more Cabbage Patch Kids in the first year than the entire doll category the year before.
Oh, what year was that? Or
That was
roughly?
that was in the early '80s,
Early
actually.
80s. Okay, I had
Yeah.
one. His name was George. I named him after George Washington.
Okay.
Yeah.
uh, and they were incredibly popular, and
Yeah.
that was a tremendous door opener for me because even people at other companies, even if they didn't care about talking to me, they sure were interested in hearing about the inside story on Cabbage Patch
Cabbage
Kids.
Patch Kids. Yeah.
So it opened a lot of doors, and then because I'm in the Boston area, I started to do a lot more marketing in tech with companies like, Lotus Development and IBM and,
Sure.
EMC and others.
Started to make that transition out of the retail space per se to some more of the tech clients, software,
Yeah.
but more forward-thinking clients.
And it was a great opportunity to really learn from some of the best marketers in the world.
Very cool.
I mean, if you're working with marketers, who are doing the biggest consumer product, of its time,
Right.
or are at IBM or at venture-backed startups, they know their stuff.
Yeah.
The Boston Globe was another big client at my agency. So,
Okay.
uh, and then transitioned about 20 years ago into the digital space because I saw that's where things were moving.
Smart.
Um, Opened my first agency in '98. We were marketing communications for those big companies for the
Yep.
first several years, and then changed the business model to a recurring revenue. So I didn't have the, if the phone stops ringing, you don't know where your next dollar is coming from.
True.
we became a SaaS company even before it was called SaaS. Back then it was called Application Service Provider.
How'd you do that? In the marketing space too? You went from, I guess
So
back then there wasn't that many apps, right? There weren't that many software tools.
right. So we developed a proprietary content management system
Oh, cool.
that was focused on the education market,
Okay.
small colleges and private schools, because when we would talk to small and mid-sized companies about content management, they would say, well, we don't change our website that much. We have a web monkey who can code a few pages in HTML a month. It's not a big deal. But schools had gotten to the point in the early 2000s where they realized the internet wasn't going away. And this is where their students were. They had to start doing, they couldn't just have the president's nephew do the website anymore. They had to have a professional, website, and they had to change their content all day long, not just a few times a month, but they were constantly putting up new events, athletic schedules and scores, assignments, notices for parents, notices for alumni. And so they needed tools that made it easy for the staff to do that.
Right.
And we really put a premium on ease of use.
Okay. Yeah, as you should, for sure.
Yeah.
Especially in SaaS.
And so that became, our core business. We became one of the top 3 or 4 companies in that market. We had clients as far away as Hong Kong.
Wow.
And so when I sold the company in 2009, it had that recurring revenue that produced a lot of value. For the sale.
That sweet recurring revenue.
Yeah, we love that recurring revenue.
Yes, I'm sure the acquirers did too. The sellers, everybody. Hey, Mazel Tov. This is great.
They could very quickly look at it and say, there was a lot of value there.
Definitely.
And so then I was VP of Business Development for 2 agencies, mid-size agencies, like 40 to 80 people kind of agencies, marketing agencies. And then in 2013 went off on my own again, opened Revenue and Associates. And so what we do, 2 of our major services are creating marketing strategies for companies, what I call a marketing strategy sprint, where we work with a company for a month and we get a lot of information about them and their competitors and do a day-long workshop to work out a strategy and a 12-month action plan.
Cool.
And we also do managed marketing services. So for companies that don't have a marketing department and need someone to manage their marketing for them on a more day-to-day basis, like search engine ads or redoing their websites or emails and things of that sort. We'll provide that service, or other kinds of workshops or consulting.
I like the idea of that sprint, the plan up front. Sometimes it's not going to take that long to plan, but you need to put that time in there so you're not just doing the next phase 3 thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, and that you start to say, well, in Q1, or in the first month we're going to do this, in the second month we're going to do this, and we look at the traditional, what programs, what technology, and what people do you need to do this. And so sometimes you have the people internally who can do it. Sometimes you need a consultant like yourself, because we're going to implement a marketing automation program in Q2, and so we're going to need a company who knows how to do that. So having that 12-month plan, you can start to plan around that and what kind of resources you need to really make it successful.
For sure. Maybe we should chat again, because I think even the idea of marketers putting together a plan, if we had to do a similar survey to find out who's planning and who's not, typically there's not the planning happening, and it's not
often
every fault per se. Sometimes you're just flying by the seat of your pants to execute the next campaign, but man, just a little bit of preparation and planning can go so far.
Yeah, and especially in that huge group of companies out there that are doing very little marketing at all, and really need a plan to kind of intelligently get into the game.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. A smart way of getting into it. Otherwise, you're going to end up testing things that have already been figured out,
Yeah.
and you're making the same mistakes that we all have. So if you can avoid that, working with someone like yourself and have a stepped plan to get yourself into the new decade here, or the new phase of marketing, yeah, by all
Yeah.
means, that company that was doing the billboards and radio, I should introduce them to you. And
Hey, you've got my email.
yeah, yeah, let's get them
You
out
know
of
where
there.
to reach me.
So last thing, because I could probably talk to you about theater all day. Do you still do any theater? Still doing any writing around that? Obviously, busy with revenue and associates.
No, I haven't done theater in quite a while, but that training, that knowledge, that approach of storytelling and being human-centered and
Yeah,
customer-centered, uh, that still carries over. And so that's very useful, so that I'm not just looking at the data, but I'm really looking at the people that are behind the data.
totally agree. And for me, I probably got a couple low grades in college because I was running our theater company at school,
Hmm.
and it was awesome. And we had website, we had online ticket sales for the first time, and all these other innovations I was learning really by doing there. So, but to
Yeah,
your point, theater is such a great bridge, whether it's for writing or talking or presenting. I'm obviously, you've seen you on stage. You're great, and you don't mess with you're always facing the right direction. So
well, it's also theater is all about teamwork, and that's
yeah,
central to
I
success
love
in,
that.
in business. Uh, theater is not a marathon runner
Right.
who can just go out there and do it, by himself
That would
every
be
morning.
comedy.
Right, that's stand-up comedy. But to do theater well, you have to do it with a lot of other people,
Yeah,
and you have to, develop those skills to be able to work with others, and that's how business gets done today.
and what's funny is um, the production, the actual show, and that exhilaration in front of a live audience is one of the best parts about it. But so is that teamwork that you mentioned too. Just working with those people for day in day out to finally put something on is just such
Yeah,
a cool experience. You're really in it together, you
yeah,
know? Yeah,
absolutely.
for sure. Any favorite plays or anything I should check out when I do my research?
Well, I did the Boston premiere of a play called Comedians by
Oh,
by Trevor Griffiths, who's a British playwright.
okay.
And Mike Nichols directed the premiere on Broadway.
Really?
So it was a big deal play in the 80s. It's a great story. It's about he's a British playwright, so it's a set in a I think Manchester or
Okay.
Liverpool. It's a group of working class men. It all takes place on one evening. Excuse me. And they're taking a class in stand-up comedy, like a night school class, and they see it as kind of their way out of their working class jobs. And on this particular night, a talent scout that the teacher has arranged for is coming from London to watch their acts. And so in the first act, you meet these guys and the teacher's approach to comedy. Um, the second act is just their stand-up routines to a bingo club that they go to that night. Uh, and then the third act is back in the classroom where they kind of find out what the talent scout thought, and wrap up the personal business between these guys. And so it's a really unique play,
Sounds
but
like a great setup.
it is really an excellent setup. And
What's it called again? Comedians?
yeah, by
Okay.
Trevor Griffiths.
Okay.
So that was a terrific play.
You know, I actually ended up writing a play when I was deployed in Iraq, and the first couple, the majority, like 90% of it was crazy fun, Call of Duty type stuff.
Hmm.
Um, Fun because it was exciting, like very exciting. Obviously, pros and cons. But the last month, I was on guard duty, and that is just 12 hours by yourself in some hot tower somewhere, middle of the desert, bored out of your mind. I remember reading a James Patterson novel in a single shift, finishing the thing, being like, oh, I'm sure I'm probably done soon. Let me check my watch. And nope, got 4 hours to go or something. I was like, I'm not reading another book today. I'm done reading. But I wrote a play while I was over there, and it was a comedy called The Most Difficult Play Ever Performed. And it was about this small theater group that they were losing money for their theater, their funding. And so the local furniture magnate who has like all these stores, her son wrote a play, and it's really challenging, but she was going to sponsor them. They really needed the money. So they thought, let's put this thing on. But it calls for everything that theater companies like cringe if it calls for it. There's fire, there's rain, there's snow, and there's even a gorilla hanging from the chandelier. Most
difficult, yeah.
Right? And so it's like, how do we even put this on? And so, the first part is I'm trying to figure that out, and eventually, they put it on. But yeah, so wrote that over there. And
well, it sounds interesting. Thank you for your service.
Oh yeah, thank you.
It kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you ever saw the musical Urinetown.
I've for sure heard of it. I don't think I've ever seen it though.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. It actually was kind of a minor hit several years ago.
It was really popular for a while. Yeah.
And the guys who wrote that were like getting nothing produced. And so they were just like, screw it, we're going to write the most unproducible musical and we're going to call it Urinetown.
Right.
And it turned into their
hit, their smash hit.
Right.
Jeez. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you looked at the clock. This time is just like warped by. I mean, this has been awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Casey.
So thank you for coming here. I've learned a lot about Bullseye Marketing. I really want to go get that book and even share that with some folks and obviously we'll put a link in the show notes. Having a focused approach like that is so huge. I mean, there's so many distractions out there. So I'm so glad to have learned just a little bit here, maybe tip of the iceberg.
And and people can go to Amazon, and they can either get the ebook or the physical book.
Okay.
I often read ebooks, but I got to tell you, the physical book is way cooler.
Yeah.
And they can reach me at louis@revenueassociates.biz.
Okay.
And I'm on LinkedIn, of course, and I'm on Twitter at Louis Gudema.
Okay. I love the audacity of throwing an email address out there on a podcast listened by millions of people.
Well, I'm an audacious guy.
That's great, man. So email links. So connect with you there. Obviously, Revenue and Associates will link to that as well in the book. So this has been awesome. Thank you again.
All right, Casey. Thanks again.
Absolutely. And for everyone else out there, if you learned anything, and I'm sure you did, because I have like pages of notes over here, guys. And if you learned anything, definitely share this with someone else. Get this information into their hands. Tell them about Bullseye Marketing so they can get some focus into their marketing. And for everyone else out there, this has been the Hardcore Marketing Show. We will see you all next time.